On today's episode, Nelson, Monty, and I take you down to Halifax waterfront, where we boarded a ferry to George's Island, this glacial drumlin and the largest island entirely within the harbor limits of Halifax. George's Island is the location of Fort Charlotte. We also make a stop at Peace by Chocolate, a company started here by a war-torn refugee family from Syria, who opened their first shop in 2012, and now, with this amazing space right down at the Halifax harbor, they are giving many an opportunity to enjoy their creations. Hey guys, so Nelson's just getting taken a parking pass, and we're actually going to go over to George's Island today, which is just off. You have to take a little paddle wheel ferry from downtown Halifax, and you can see it pretty much from anywhere downtown. And we're gonna go check it out. It's been on our bucket list of things to do for quite some time, and for a change, it's a weekend where it's super sunny and we just wanted to get out and explore, so that is what we're gonna do. So we're gonna take you guys with us. So this is the ferry that we're going to take over to George's Island for a little walkabout, see what we can see at George's Island. It looks really nice. I thought it was just going to be a simple little ferry, little boat, but it looks really cool. So yeah, here we go. It's a quick 5-minute boat ride from downtown Halifax to George's Island. It's $25 per adult, but includes a two-way ferry ride and the entrance fee to George's Island itself. George's Island was used for the D'Anville Expedition of 1746, to the establishment of the first fortifications in 1750, and the internment of Acadian prisoners during the deportation of 1755 through 64, to the later development of technology, advanced harbor defenses in the Victorian era, and finally continued use on the island by the Canadian Army during the First and Second World Wars.
All right, so here we are on George's Island. It's been a fortification in the Royal Navy, in the Royal Army, up into the Royal Navy, all the way since the early 1600s. The camp was designed to defend the world's natural wonders, Halifax Harbor. It is the world's largest natural harbor, deepwater harbor. All right, so here we are at the entrance to Fort Charlotte. In the 1790s, it was completely rebuilt under the order of Prince Edward, the Duke of Kent, trying to make sure that the entrance to Halifax Harbor was secure from the French.
So these are the vents here. There's all over the place, and these are to vent the tunnels down below, which we're hoping to do a tunnel tour. I don't know how much we'll be able to see in the dark, but anyway, yeah, they're all over the place, obviously, so you can get air while underneath the ground.
What happens is the Canadians are sitting there and they're eating their corned beef in their little tins, and generally having an okay time until then. And then they see this white cloud coming towards them. The wind's kind of coming towards them. And as it's getting closer, some of them start coughing. And then some of them start realizing blood's coming out of their mouth. So what's going on? What is this white cloud? They don't know what it is. No one's ever had this happen before. So a Canadian doctor, remember I mentioned how they shine their buttons every day? So they're still doing that, even though it made them a nice target, right, for the enemy shooters. This doctor realizes everyone's buttons are turning brown right before his eyes, just like that. And he knows enough about gas, been to university, done chemistry, to know it must be chlorine gas. So he orders all the soldiers to take out their handkerchiefs and urinate on their handkerchiefs, and then they wrap that around their faces. Right? Gross, right? But the urine had some kind of chemical in it that would block the chlorine and save their lives. And then when the German soldiers came, they weren't expecting any of the Canadians to be left, and the Canadians fought them off. So right away, the British, the Canadians, and the French all start using gas too. Everyone starts using it. It's like, weapons are bad, but if you don't have weapons and the other person has weapons, you can't defend yourself, right? So to protect themselves, they start wearing these. This is the first gas mask. It's called a pH hood. You can see these big goggles here. As soon as you put this on, they fog up. Like, with swimming goggles when they get all foggy on the inside, even worse. And if you're small, it doesn't quite fit. It's also like wearing a balaclava in the summertime. On the inside, this is what you breathe through. So it's just like a snorkel. You have to bite onto this, and you have to breathe through your nose and breathe out with your mouth. Otherwise, it won't work. It would only last for 24 hours. After that, basically the wool here had a chemical in it that would protect you from the gas. It would kind of filter it out, and after about a day, it would wear off. Then they switched to this. This becomes kind of the symbol of World War I. You go onto Google and you search World War I soldier, you're going to find a picture of someone wearing this. This is the Small Box Respirator. The British Army and the Canadian Army, and I think eventually the American Army uses this. Basically, this little box here has a filter in it. So this tube goes down to the box, and you keep the box in this pouch, and it would just kind of hang around your neck. And you keep the mask folded up in there. When you heard someone yell, "Gas, gas, gas," you pull out your mask, pull off your helmet, get this strapped on, and then you are safe. You could wear this until you ran out, and basically until you were too thirsty or too hungry to continue. You could just keep wearing it. Sometimes they would wear it for 3 days, 4 days, however long until they got relieved. Nowadays, we kind of all know there was World War I and there was gas in it. We kind of don't understand, and it's impossible for us to understand how much of this there was. Again, they were wearing this cloth helmet at the beginning of the war, and as the war broke on, they started to realize no one was dying of gunshots. People were, but not very many. Almost everyone was dying because they were in a trench, right? And they were being hit in the head by falling shrapnel or falling rocks. Because when they're shooting the cannons at each other, the cannons would explode and drop all this rock and shrapnel all over the place. So the only way to keep protected was to wear this helmet. So that's why you can see how it's all going upwards, right? It's not protecting the sides, it's only protecting the top. So this is what Canadian soldiers and British soldiers wear right to the end of World War II. You can find pictures, some of them wearing them even into the Korean War. So again, another big symbol of the First World War. Now, right over here, this is their marching uniform, or their kit rather. It's called webbing, and it's all tangled up at the moment, but I'll get it sorted. And it's basically a series of straps and buckles that all hook up together. It's designed to distribute the weight around your body. So if you go to 1890, just a little bit before World War I, it's all leather straps. They're carrying just as much on their backs, but the leather straps cut into your shoulder and you lose circulation, your arm goes dead, and then you can't fight very well. So they designed this, and it's miles ahead of anything anyone else has before. The British were actually, and the Canadians, were actually further ahead in terms of infantry kit. This is the bayonet, so this is the big knife they put on the end of their rifle. You can see how long that is, 21 inches long. This is their large pack, so everything you owned would fit in here. This is the small pack, that's where you put your food, basically. Right in this little pouch, this is your entrenching tool, so that's where this goes. That's your shovel. On the side, there's your canteen. So they'd have water in there. When they went over the top, they'd always drink rum. They'd have a shot of rum before they went over. And it took, you can say it took the edge off, but a lot of them really thought they needed that in order to physically make it up that ladder and get out of the trenches.
Is that where they get liquid courage from?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Yes. So again, it looks complicated and not comfortable, but actually it's quite good. All together, once you have everything on and you're in full marching order with everything on it, it's 90 to 100 pounds. So the beginning of the war, wherever they go, and the soldiers, remember back then they have to walk everywhere. Wherever they're fighting, they wear all of it on them. So the Battle of the Somme, the Newfoundlanders and the Brits and the French, there weren't very many Canadians at the first part of the Battle of the Somme. And they go over the top, they have their entire full marching order on, all 100 pounds of it. And then they walk right into machine gun fire. And 60,000 are killed in one day. Later on in the war, they learn to only take what's necessary with them when they attack. And that's kind of what the Canadians do at the Battle of Vimy Ridge. They're equipped lightly. Each unit has one job to do. They have to go out and capture one part, and then they stay there. They don't all move together. So the Canadians start to fight a little bit differently. And eventually the rest of the British Army and the French Army start to fight differently. And by the end of World War I, what was basically a very Victorian soldier has changed into something we recognize as a modern soldier. They're fighting differently. They're using machine guns. They even have light machine guns they can carry around with them. They're wearing helmets. They've got gas masks. Canada's a big part of that. What I'm wearing is the World War II uniform, of course. And you can see, because they knew they were going to wear helmets most of the time, the caps get lighter. They're not wearing these kind of fancy service caps anymore. Now the webbing, this is it. It's gotten even lighter and more practical. You can see it's based on the same thing. There's some similarities. Canteen, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Canteen's the same. Bayonet sheath. The bayonet actually changes in the war for one type of rifle, but this has the old type bayonet on it. And the entrenching tool's the same. What's changed is the ammo pouches. So the front of that uniform, it's all for the small rifle rounds. These are for the heavy machine gun ammunition. So by World War II, the way they fight has shifted from the idea being you'd have 100 riflemen firing accurately and quickly at the enemy to a few machine gun positions that you're supporting. So the system of how they fight has changed. And the uniform's starting to reflect that. Soldier's job, and especially in the First World War, I'm going to join, I'm going to go fight and stuff. Actually, you're going to dig. So this is the most important part of your kit in a lot of ways. Once they're in the trenches, they, like I pointed out, how that big long bayonet that sticks on the end of your rifle. And if you're in a big field like this, that's the kind of weapon you want. It's something you can point from far away, right? Once you're in the trenches, there's nowhere to move. That's not as useful. So they start using their entrenching tools as weapons, and they start sharpening them. And then towards the end of the war, they start putting like nails in the side of this. And the Canadians, especially the Nova Scotians, the 25th Battalion, they become known as trench raiders. And what they do is, in the middle of the night, they crawl out into no man's land. They try to be really quiet as long as possible so that the enemy doesn't shoot flares in the air. And then they get into the enemy trench, and they just cause mayhem. They capture people, they kill some people, they throw around some grenades, they steal some stuff, steal food. They love stealing food, and then retreat. And the idea was, if you did this enough, you'd cause chaos in enemy lines, and they wouldn't be able to fight effectively. You'd also gain intelligence, right? If you found a map over there, figured out where the enemy artillery was, perfect. So the Canadians become known for that kind of thing.
Circa World War I LED lights.
So in here, we were able to take all of the explosives that were used to fire off the cannons and burn out all guns. So this is really the center point of the tunnel system. Everything extends out from here, and the whole reason for this was that as artillery pieces started to advance, the guns started to get bigger and bigger. Therefore, the actual shells they were firing and the amount of black powder needed to fire those shells was getting bigger and bigger too. Therefore, getting heavier and heavier. Here, there would have been 2 rails in the floor that carts would have been able to roll along. So they would lead to this room here and the various expense cartridge stores through the tunnel system. And at each of those, there'd be a winch system, so pulleys and everything to be able to lift up the cartridge or shell and place it down on the cart so that they can wheel it to one of the little elevator shafts, where there would be another pulley system, crank system, to be able to hoist it up to the guns that are now above us and load them and fire them off. So in a room like this, they would have been able to store around 10 tons of black powder. It was definitely enough to flatten the island if it were to explode. I'll say right off the bat, I'm a little bit out of place in this fort since it really is preserved during the Victorian era where I'm wearing the World War II kit. So if anything, some of the people that are in the dark tunics and trousers with little pill bumper bell-hopping hats. That's what the Victorian soldiers would have been wearing that were actually working in here at the time. So since their uniform was made of wool, they had brass on it and then field plates, so there are a lot of things that could potentially cause a spark and make this room explode. So they had to come in here to make black powder or just working in here for the day. They actually had to switch into a new uniform. It was made of much softer cotton. There was no brass buttons on it. All the buttons would have been made of wood. And they had to put little slippers on over their boots to prevent their field plates from causing any sparks on the concrete. After they changed, they were able to go about their business in here and do as they needed. And the other main thing that is kind of obvious that prevented this room from exploding was through the tunnels, there would have been lanterns and candles lighting it. And for obvious reasons, they couldn't have that in this room, so it would be pretty dark in here. That tarped off area above the door is actually a tunnel that leads outside, so a bit of light does come in through there, but it's still pretty dark. So a ditch is a very common design feature in many Victorian forts, such as this one. And it's pretty much this big trench that runs all the way around the exterior of the fort. Now the most common question we get both here and at the Citadel about the ditch is, was it a moat? Where's the water? Was there water? Long answer short, no. For the long answer to that. So the reason it's not a moat is because moats were a medieval thing. So if you think of it, knights are wearing armor, which is made of metal. You fall into water, you're going to drown because it's too heavy. Now, during the Victorian era and even into the First World Wars, soldiers are wearing wool into combat. Now, definitely wouldn't recommend it, but if push came to shove and you really needed to do it, you can swim in wool. It would just be super uncomfortable. So it's actually more deadly to just have the hard plank ground to fall on rather than having that water as a cushion to fall into. And it was so deadly because the average height of the walls for the ditch was 40 to 60 feet. So depending on how you fell, you would most likely break your legs, and if you fell at the wrong angle, it could most likely definitely kill you. So it definitely wasn't a fun place to be. And another reason for that is currently what we're standing in is a capping yank. So these extend the full width of the ditch and would have gone all the way around the fort. And what these do is provide a secondary line of fire into the ditch. So apart from shooting down from the top, you can shoot horizontally through these little windows, which pretty much make sure there's no blind spots within the ditch, and it's pretty much a giant death trap. With that, we'll head on out. Trait through history. If Halifax is always way too defended or over defended, and then nothing ever happens. I guess that's really a good thing, but still all the efforts are kind of in vain with that. And also it needed to be a bit of an intimidation method since it was the first one they were going to meet to potentially scare off any potential attackers. Okay, so folks, these guns right here were the reason why they had to start burying the forts underground. So this one specifically is a 10-inch rifled muzzle-loading cannon. It sounds like a bit of a mouthful, but the name really does tell you everything you need to know about the gun. So this is one of the 5 that historically would have been down here. The 10-inch in the name is the diameter of the shell that would have been fired out of it. That shell, they use shells in these styles of cannons rather than the cannonballs, so really just look like a giant bullet. And that shell would have weighed about 410 pounds. And that weight there is really the whole reason for the tunnels and the pulleys and the cranks. So it's not the average person can lift up 410 pounds. And then that shell would have taken about 70 pounds of black powder to fire off. So the rifle part of the name, so rifling for anyone that doesn't know, are spiral grooves that run all the way down the bores of the tube that makes up the gun. And what that does is it puts a bit of a spin on the shot. So it allows it to go a lot farther and allows it to be a lot more accurate. How I kind of like to compare it is throwing in American football with the proper spiral, so it's definitely going to go a lot farther and pretty much exactly where you want it, compared to lobbing a soccer ball over your head. It's not going to go as far. You might get halfway through your throw, you might bounce off your finger, go this way, go that way, and just be a lot less accurate. And due to that rifling, the maximum range of these guns was about 6,000 meters. So 6 kilometers, it could go pretty far out into the harbor. That was more accurate for the ones on top since you needed a bit more of an angle to get that further trajectory. Whereas more average, 9 times out of 10, it will actually hit a shot, was 2,000 meters. So still 2 kilometers, that's still pretty far. Ones down here in the lower battery were expedition vessels, since we are so close or so level with the harbor that they were actually able to skip the shells off the water, just like skipping a stone, which I definitely think would be super terrifying to see that coming towards my ship, just a giant shell about this big, just bouncing along the water. But anyway, the final part of the name, muzzle loading, just means that everything has to be put through the muzzle. There's no way to put it in through the back. And with that, since it's muzzle loading, it takes a very long time to load. It takes a crew of 18 men about 15 minutes to fully load and fire just one round. Thankfully, around the Victorian era, they were starting to develop electric detonation. So it's pretty much this wire you put into the vent, and And you can feed that water out into the ditch, or you can then put a bit of cotton in your ears and set it off. Since me just talking right now, even with my mask on, it's pretty echoey in here, so I couldn't even imagine being in here with 70 pounds of black powder going off. I guess for comparison, if any of you have been at the Citadel around noon, or even just in the downtown on this side of the hill, around lunchtime you would have heard the noon gun go off, or if you're here in the next several days, hear it go off. That's only 1 pound of black powder, so it's about 70 times as loud as that. I'd like to make on our tour is to the well here. So you might ask me what could possibly be so interesting about this well. So personally why I think it's so interesting is because it's actually a freshwater well. And I think that's pretty cool since we're on an island in the middle of the ocean. But with that, it goes about 200 feet down, and this one was specifically used to get water for the guns. So if you wanted to repeat fire the guns, you had to put a little bit of water through the bore to dampen any embers that could have been potentially left over from firing it previously, so that as you were loading the next round, it wouldn't cause the charge to go off prematurely. But also, since black powder starts to build up over time, the guns had to be regularly cleaned to maintain them, so they wouldn't misfire or just not work as well. And as we can all imagine, that's why the freshwater well was so important. Since they started using the salt water from the ocean, it would corrode the metal, making it weaker, and then inevitably cause it to explode, which would be a big disaster and definitely hurt a lot of people, especially with the amount of black powder they were using. And just a gun of that size exploding would not be a nice time to be around.
We're currently in the left half of the upper battery, so it's pretty much a big horseshoe that goes down for the other side. You can go downstairs up the other side, but if you go down either way, it will bring you back to the parade square where we started our tour.
The Haddad family were invited into Canada in 2012 and started creating their specialty in Antigonish, Nova Scotia. They grew popular, and their refugee story becoming one of hope, hard work, and dedication. It's no wonder that they opened a location right in the busy Halifax harbor. With so much to choose from, you won't leave empty-handed. So we're home a couple hours later, and we're gonna have a 19 Crimes glass of wine, and we're gonna open up this Piece by Chocolate. Ooh, so here we go. This box of chocolates was about $22 Canadian.
Yep.
And these are all truffles. We've got blueberry, we have, I think this is passion fruit, chocolate mint. That was a chai. I'm really looking forward to that one. I think this is no, this one's peanut butter. I
can't remember what that one is. This one's there's two things here. I can't remember which one's which, but anyway, there's the ones with nuts on them. And I think this one's got to get flipped over. Yep. So you got two. Nelson likes his raspberry, so you got two of the raspberry there. But yeah. So, yum yum.